Hey everyone, in this video I will discuss a topic that I tend to see come up more now than ever, which is the discourse surrounding difficulty in gaming. Over the years, this keeps getting brought up, typically whenever someone gets into a debate on whether or not a Soulsborne game needs to have an easy mode. It sparks a full-on discourse of if all games should have an easy difficulty, and if anyone tries to say that there shouldn't be, you generally will be labeled either an ableist or a gatekeeping elitist. And now that the new Elden Ring DLC is out and harder than ever, this debate is at the forefront of discussion in gaming at the moment. I wanted to tackle this subject because those of you who have been watching me for years on both YouTube and Twitch will know that I prefer having a challenge in most of my games, which I convey by having many challenge fights and or restricted super boss videos across the Kingdom Hearts series. For me personally, I don't have a disability, and I greatly enjoy the accomplishing feeling of overcoming a challenge, even if many times having to self-impose restrictions to achieve this goal. But of course, not everybody shares this mindset, so let's dive further into this. Due to the overwhelming amount of discussion Soulsborne games specifically cause, I will be focusing on that franchise instead of diverting into other series. To anyone who may for whatever reason be out of the loop, Soulsborne are games developed by FromSoft that have a similar type of design to their gameplay. Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1 through 3, Bloodborne, Sekiro, and Elden Ring are all the games that are currently called Soulsborne, with Sekiro being debatable due to its decently different type of designed mechanics. So as I reference Soulsborne games in this video, it will be for those, and not the Souls-like games, which refers to non-FromSoft developed titles that try to create a game similar to Soulsborne. Anyway, let's get started. One of the largest offenses of wanting all games to have an easy mode is to handle disabilities. It is hard to argue that players who have disabilities that could make it impossible to complete a game are just out of luck and they shouldn't even bother playing the game. Most gaming companies these days appear to agree on allowing support for disabilities by adding increasingly useful accessibility options. The other way this gets accomplished is by offering a difficulty of easy mode in a game, often labeling it as story mode. Calling a difficulty story mode usually is accompanied by in-game text indicating to the player that this mode is for people who want to just breeze through the story and do not care for the challenge. This all sounds great, so you may be wondering, what's the issue? Okay, maybe most people watching this already know, but I'll pretend to be naive for a moment. Where the controversy comes from is commonly when Soulsborne games specifically come up, where Miyazaki, the creator of Soulsborne games, has shown that they do not want to make an easy mode in their games. This causes two polarized negative responses. The first are the players who jump in and say, well, he doesn't want to, get good, etc. The other is that you're being an ableist and a gatekeeper for not pushing back at including a difficulty option, and all games should have one. Just like politics, you can expect the people who form these strong stances to not easily be convinced otherwise, typically resulting in somewhat of a hostile, egocentric debate. Instead of dissecting both of the opinions immediately, I would argue a better approach is to talk about Soulsborne game design, such as their selling point, design mechanics, intended ways of play, etc. First and foremost, I will bring up a point that many know but is worth reiterating. Soulsborne games are not the hardest games out there, not even close. While they do break the norm of hand-holding modern gaming, the difficulty of them is insignificant in comparison to other games and genres, such as many shmups, rhythm games, indie platformers, etc. But yet, every time a challenging game in another genre comes out, gaming journalism likes to praise them as being the Dark Souls of this genre. Remember Cuphead and Crash Team Racing Remake? Yeah, those were the Dark Souls of platform shooters and kart racing games respectively, according to gaming articles at the time. I believe this is due to Soulsborne games tending to have the right amount of challenge. The games aren't impossibly difficult where you need to full memorize boss patterns or spend hours of grinding to get past walls. Soulsborne games are set up for you to die to a boss and attempt for you to learn from it within a reasonable amount of time for most players. There is a skill set required for basic reaction times and reading enemies, but it is nothing that is generally too big of an ask. Additionally, these games aren't designed for people who want to first try most bosses and breeze through. For example, it's not uncommon for people to play games like Final Fantasy and have no trouble clearing most, if not all bosses, first try. Soulsborne doesn't want you to barely get by on numerous fights first try. They want you to lose at least once to make you reflect on your decisions and consider if you're taking the best approach. Or to expose you for being too stubborn and changing your possibly problematic playstyle. But this does still beg the question, why can't Soulsbornes just have an easy mode? Well, it could. There's nothing stopping Miyazaki from implementing one if he chooses to. But in Soulsborne games, due to them having one difficulty, the game is attempted to be balanced around that. An easy mode, save for maybe being allowed to instantly one-shot all bosses, would require proper balancing and design. That's more dev time, whether you can sympathize or not. But get this, what if I told you most Soulsborne games already have an easy mode? This isn't really profound because again, many already understand this, but for the sake of this video, I need to spell it out. The games may not offer a title screen difficulty selection, but the game itself lets you choose to cheese it rather easily, to the point where many players have to self-impose restrictions to have the infamous challenge, and unfortunately look down on other players who employ these easy methods. Yes, as it turns out, most Soulsbornes are not as well balanced in difficulty as often stated by players. So how does this count as an easy mode? Well, for starters, you can summon in areas and bosses. If you are online, you can summon actual competent players that can quite easily solo content for you if you let them. If you don't play online, you can still summon NPCs often that are a great help, though they can be fairly different depending on which Soulsborne you're playing. Secondly, you have the entirety of the internet at your disposal to look up builds, boss strategies, etc. It is not hard to find broken builds for each game that trivialize almost everything or simply learn cheese methods of handling bosses in general. With all of this said up until this point, it does appear a difficulty selection may be redundant if the game already has built-in easier difficulty that doesn't revolve around get good. Something I really need to bring up is the overall selling point of Soulsborne games. It is the difficulty. These games throw you into their worlds, no difficulty selection, no big tutorials, and you're at the mercy of exploring the world and mechanics to figure things out. This is why these games sell as well as they do. You can sit here and talk about how great Dark Souls 1's world design is, how well done Bloodborne's aesthetic is, how expansive Elden Ring's open world is, but if it weren't for the games having a single difficulty everyone must abide by that forces people to accept the challenge of the game, then it wouldn't be as well respected as it is currently. Soulsborne games break the norm of difficulty that's typically set for these type of games, which is why they defined essentially their own genre of Souls-like that so many other game devs have been trying to emulate. Due to the game's notorious challenge, many players jump in and sort of make their own difficulty. For me personally, my own code of honor for these games was to not use summons, both NPC and real players, and not accept any backseating tips or look up anything, because I live streamed playing them. I get more enjoyment out of the games this way. In Dark Souls 1, I found out the hard way how busted NPC summons were when I was struggling against Bell Gargoyles, a common major first playthrough wall. I decided to see what a summon looked like and discovered Solaire easily helps you take them down, and I cleared it without issue. After that, I was determined to never summon again to beat a boss. There are many other players who play like this as well, where they don't like outside help, or at least limit it to an extent. So choosing not to take these options, but then complaining there's no easy mode feels quite narrow-minded. The Soulsborne exception to this would mostly be Sekiro, as that game offers no summons of any kind and there isn't a traditional leveling system the other Soulsborne games have, which is why Sekiro is often considered partial Soulsborne. That game is mostly skill-based to overcome the challenges, though of course, online resources such as what prosthetics are effective against each boss will help make the game easier. If all the Soulsbornes operated like this, I would see more merit in difficulty selection debates, but because it is a lone wolf of design for From Software Soulsborne, I will leave it off to the side of this discussion. Yet another large outcry of wanting an easy mode in all games is due to some players not really wanting a challenge whatsoever. They proclaim they're missing out on Soulsborne for this reason. Well, unfortunately, not all games are for everyone. I'm not speaking about disabilities here, but player preference. Since the main selling point of Soulsborne is the difficulty, and Miyazaki stated he wants players to overcome the challenges, that would imply you're not entitled to experience the game if you're trying to avoid the intended designs of it. It would be like me, who doesn't want to play sports games, trying to say all sports games should have a robust storyline for me to be invested in it, and that otherwise it's lame I can't experience them because they won't cater to my preferences to get me to try them. Miyazaki wants players to have a certain type of experience, and if you don't agree with that, then perhaps this game or genre is not for you. I come from Kingdom Hearts, of course, where I enjoy playing level 1 or critical mode in general. But the selling point of Kingdom Hearts is not the difficulty, like a Soulsborne game. The KH series does not want players to be forced to struggle through challenges. They just want the players to experience the world and story, which is why beginner mode exists for them and works fine. If the Kingdom Hearts devs' intention for the games were to struggle and lose to bosses to overcome their challenges, then it would be odd to offer a beginner mode. But for Soulsborne, since the selling point is the difficulty, it would diminish the intended experience if they just allowed you to jump into a selectable easy mode. To bring this back full circle on the two polarized opinions of Soulsborne difficulties, and difficulties in general, is that it should be up to the game devs on if they want the difficulty to be a selling point. I do believe they should include as many accessibility settings as possible, as that adds basic inclusivity for players that are up for the challenge, but a disability stops them from reasonably executing it, such as having a colorblind accessibility option to handle those type of designed gameplay aspects. Having a disability is not the same as feeling like you don't want a challenge, so you want to one-shot all bosses to breeze through. As for my own personal opinion of what I would prefer, I wouldn't care if Soulsborne had an easy difficulty, because I would just not select it. That's what I do with Kingdom Hearts, so it's the same I'd do for Soulsborne. So even though I appear to be supporting the idea of no difficulty selection, it doesn't mean I personally would stop playing Soulsborne. What I would like to see done differently is how they handle the questionable balancing of allowing people to cheese the game. It may sound contradictory to earlier where I said the game was balanced to one difficulty, but here I am for the second time this video saying Soulsborne is not actually well balanced technically. But the reason they are unbalanced is mostly tied to these outside resources, such as summons and online guides. Taking those away gives a better illusion of balance that are the reason many claim that an easy mode would need to be balanced. So to maybe help alleviate this going forward, I would like a way for players to be rewarded for avoiding, for example, summons of any kind. There's probably a reasonable method the devs could come up with to benefit those of us who have to self-impose restrictions to make the game not too easy, while also still giving people who want to experience the game in an easier way the ability to do so, while simultaneously retaining its intended challenging difficulty. This would also not require balancing the entire difficulty around an easy mode, so this is something I think would be worth considering. So to wrap up this video, I hopefully did a decent job explaining the discourse surrounding this topic. While I do believe devs should be allowed to decide if they want difficulty modes or not, I do also believe that they should implement as many accessibility options as possible to not push away anyone with disabilities that still want a challenge. Since Soulsborne games typically offer summons and have broken builds that are reasonably obtainable, that should be considered an easy mode to some extent, even if it's not explicitly labeled as such by the game itself. You can even grind levels if you feel like it's too tough for the way you play, so all of these possibilities together can significantly cut down the game's difficulty. You recall the popular meme of get good when talking about difficulty in Soulsborne? Well, instead, it should be get smart, because rather than requiring raw player skill to overcome the challenges, being smart can accomplish this goal much easier. Hopefully, more people will eventually adopt this mindset and perhaps stop trying to convince Miyazaki to do something he has stated he does not want to do, and instead put that effort towards more productive critiques of Soulsborne's. As always, thanks for watching.